discipline of 2 or 3 days a week? Like, is there a time where you feel like, do you feel like there's a different breakthrough attached to them, or does one just keep your heart pure and seeking God, and the other one's spiritual breakthrough? Like, how do you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I find they both work in different ways. And what I mean by that is I would be willing to believe that most would rather do, let's say, a momentary long fast, because it doesn't require the extension of discipline and attention. It would be much harder if someone were to say to you, give me 3 days a week for 2018, than to say, give me the first 40 days of 2018. Because what I find is the consistency of discipline is what becomes much harder. It becomes much harder than a momentary offering. Right? Like we could endure the intensity in a given moment. But to bring an extension to that to where it's laid over a stretched out amount of time, it becomes an entirely different ballgame. But God is dealing with the discipline of it. Right? Hebrews 12. If I don't discipline you, then you're illegitimate. For all sons who come, I discipline. And discipline is not a negative word. Right? But discipline is what conditions us to embody the things that God has said to us. Right? Like the process that God puts us in is what prepares us to not just acquire revelation, but to become a revelation. To actually become something and not just know something. So the discipline is the cultivating of whatever specific principle or truth or God's reason for bringing you in is what actually brings you to the place of being able to embody the thing that God has spoken to you or shown to you. So they both work in incredibly different ways. I mean, they're both amazing. If you're asking, is one better than the other?
Or just, I guess, like, what benefit would you say, like, a 40 would give as opposed to, like, the discipline piece? So, if God speaks to you by design, is that usually, like, a 40-day thing? Like, this will lead to this? Or is 2-3 days how to become?
Yeah, not always. It's as simple at times as missing one meal. And it can be, if we view it in simplicity or complexity, it can be as simple as 40 days. Just whatever the Lord is saying. But I do believe, personally, that there is something of a generational release over a 40-day fast. I think it's unavoidable. The representation of 40, even throughout the scriptures, being the reference for a generation. I think God does something generationally over the experience of a 40-day fast that you just don't find in other places. And I'm not even necessarily saying a 40-day liquid fast, a 40-day water fast. 40 days, period, is hard regardless of what the design is. 40 days sun up to sundown, 40 days Daniel, 40 days liquid, 40 days is 40 days. But the significance or the reference of the 40 days being attached to a generation in the scriptures, I believe that God breaks things generationally through the offering of 40 days. I was sitting with the Lord at the conclusion of my first 40 days back in 2009. And I had all types of other reasons why I entered into this fast. But I find that God will use whatever He has to get you. And once He has you, He has you. And I had a lot of other reasons that I had gone into this fast. And over the duration of the fast, God really wrecked me. And I remember sitting on the floor in a sanctuary building at the conclusion of the 40 days. I knew that I was going to break that evening. And I just began to ask the Lord. I said, God, what is significant of 40 days? Why are there only a few men throughout the scriptures that are revealed? Not to say that these are the only ones, but they're the only ones revealed as having a 40 in their life. Like, why not 45? Why not 32? Like what is the significance of the 40? And I just sat there in silence, and as bright as anything I had ever seen with my eyes closed, there was vivid, lightning-like images that just began to strike. And God showed me a period of, let's say, 15 years of my life where I heard one phrase at the end of what seemed like this flashing of life before me. And he said, "You've repaired the breach." And I didn't understand what that meant. But he said, "Your children and your children's children and your children's children's children will not have to endure what came looking for you."
Come on.
Wow.
I didn't walk with anybody in my upbringing who taught me about the Lord. My parents aren't saved. I wasn't instructed in ways to walk with Jesus. We never went to church. I have a little bit of a different background. But no one, I say that to say this, no one ever sat down with me to say there are these types of generational things that have impacted our family heritage. Be on guard for specific things that are going to come looking for you, that want to master you. Nobody sat down with me and told me that on my dad's side, my entire family line had been overtaken by alcoholism and drug addiction and all of these types of things, and that adultery and all this other types of stuff ran all the way down my mother's family line. No one sat down with me to give me insight or to forewarn me that there would be certain things that would come looking for me that had come looking for many before me. And I believe that in that moment what the Lord was saying is that you have severed the tie of this generational attachment, so that your children and their children and their children will not have to deal with these strongholds, if you would, that gripped you, that you never knew were even to come looking for you. Because had someone sat down with me to give me insight that there were certain things looking for me, I would not have taken ownership of things that were coming from the outside, instead of believing that their origin was from the inside. I didn't understand why there was overwhelming temptation in certain directions, even at a very early age. This was not just common to all young people, right? Like we write things off, oh, that's just what all young people go through. I'm not telling my kids that.
Come on.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
That's not their portion.
Jesus.
So no one sat down with me to tell me that alcoholism and a sexual lifestyle and drug addiction and these types of things had ravaged my entire family line because of generational strongholds and bondage. Nobody ever sat down with me to tell me. But I believe that without even being spiritual enough to ask for something like this, that God did this. Because this was on His heart. And I didn't even know that it should have been on mine. Because until that moment, I didn't have any understanding of even what my history was all about in the first place. You know, so there was great clarity that came to me at the conclusion of the 40. But this is just one reference, obviously. I believe that there are many other generational breakthroughs and, let's say, freedoms that God can bring through a 40-day fast. There's just no way around that.
What is one of the strangest kind of fast that we're ever talking about?
Yeah, the strangest one to date, which to me didn't seem significant at all. The Lord spoke to me years ago and said, stay away from desserts for 30 days. I was like, what? I mean, who would care? But to date, that's been one of the simpler yet stranger ones. I'm trying to think, yeah, that would be it.
Have you ever seen somebody fascinating?
I have seen people say they are fasting other things than food. In my own personal belief, according to the simple definition of fasting, by definition being an abstaining from food or specific foods intended towards a religious purpose, I believe that these other things are not called fasting. Call them that if you would like to, but I believe that they are called discipline.
It's good.
Come
We're
on.
not fasting TV. Right? If you have a problem with the television, discipline your life.
Come on, preach it.
Turn the television off.
So good.
You're not fasting the TV.
Yeah.
You are entering into real discipline.
Yeah.
So there was a united effort in fasting. They waited to hear from the Lord. And once they had encountered God, they kept on fasting before they made any decision of what to do with what they heard. This is huge for me. Because I believe that we see a biblical precedent for encounter should push us into fasting. Daniel chapter 9, he references years of experiences that he's had, to which in his own testifying, he says, I don't even really understand what's all been going on. And here's a summary of things that have been happening to me. It's a summary. Right? As you read through, you understand this. It's not everything. But these are the things that he felt to give detail to or description of. It's a summary. And he's like, man, I've been having these wild encounters, these wild like dreams and visions and experiences and visitations, and I don't really understand what's going on. But Daniel 9:3, so I turned my attention to the Lord with fasting and praying. Jesus, in Matthew 3:17, his face breaks the waters of baptism at the Jordan with John. We know the heavens are opened, the dove descends, the audible voice thunders in the earth. But immediately, pushed by the Spirit into a 40-day wilderness fast, encounter pushed him into fasting. I believe that encounter should push us into fasting so we don't fumble or misapply the things that God imparted to us in the encounter. I believe that we have to see it through so that we know what to do with what has been revealed to us. Because many see or hear and take off running in their own directions. But fasting is what once again sifts us through our mind from God's to where we actually know what to do and the timing thereof with what it is that God has even come into the place of encounter for. Fasting helps us to always not try to capitalize on the encounter and leverage it towards our own desires. We have to understand, like, yes, God came. Man, I'm glad you're here. There's a lot of things I want you to do. But why did you come? Why are you here? Without always thinking, man, if I can just get one more encounter, then man, people will start recognizing me. Man, if I can just get one more encounter, then I'll start getting invited. Like if I can just get one more encounter, and we always try to capitalize the encounter and leverage it towards our own desires. But fasting reveals to us not only the means, but also the timing of what was on God's heart for him to show up in the first place. And they fasted all the way through, and then laid hands on them and sent them off. Yes, there's power in agreement. Right? Wherever 2 or 3 would be. But we also know Amos 3:3. How can 2 walk together lest they agree? Right? So these men together, waiting on the Lord, actually shifted the entire course of history because of one day worshiping and fasting together. Consider that. The Holy Ghost coming and setting apart Barnabas and Saul completely shifted the entire Gentile understanding. Shifted the course of history. Man, do we enter into times of prayer and fasting together believing that quite possibly, man, God could speak something to us today that would change the course of history? Now, once again, I'm not saying that they entered that way, but it happened.
Well, some of the things you said, Sterling, have already answered my question a bit. But, so, what would you say to someone who doesn't feel they can food fast for health reasons? Because you've talked about other denials not being fasting.
I would say there is a food you can fast.
Oh,
There is. There is. It's as simple as turning to the Lord and and asking Him what His design for you is. It may not look the same as me. You know, you may not be able to do a liquid fast, but you could cut dessert for 30 days. Right? You may not be able to do a sun up to sundown, or do a Daniel, or do whatever the thing is. You may not be able to do that. But the Lord could say, don't eat turkey for 30 days. Stay away from steak for 3 months. Okay, so I can eat chicken, I can eat this. Yeah. Stay away from steak. I know someone the Lord spoke to and said, eat fish and vegetables for 30 days. And they did not see it through because it was so overwhelmingly foolish to them that they couldn't believe that God would say that they could eat fish and vegetables and that that would be considered fasting. But however, came back to me 2 months later and said, man, I recognize now that that really was God. I just didn't appreciate it in the moment because it didn't seem hard enough.
Wow.
In my early days of fasting, God would speak to me and He might say something like, let's do 3 days. And I would say, man, 3 days? Like, I felt like I heard 3 days, but man, if I'm going to fast, like, I'm going to fast. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not doing 1 day. Like, I'm built for more than 1 day. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and I would do 10 days, and I would do 40 days, or I would start 40 days. I've started more 40s than I finished. But it didn't seem hard enough to me. I felt like there had to be more effort given. The only effort required is the effort that's been revealed. Don't make anything more, don't take anything away. Whatever He said is what He said, and it's more than enough.
Come on.
And even if it doesn't seem hard enough, even if it's not necessarily something that you would hold up against somebody else's effort, all of that is irrelevant. What He's saying to me is what He's saying to me.
Come on.
You're not accountable to what I do. I am. You know, and even if it doesn't seem hard enough, right? Like, nobody understands your situation like the Lord. Right? So He'll speak specifically into where you are with what He knows you can do that will be an offering from you.
Jesus. So
You know, and just let it be whatever it is. You know, because there's beauty in that.
wow.
So it's personal in terms of sort of like breaking fast, probably the wrong language to use it, is that say you're on a fast and there's a specific special event like a wedding. If you ever come across something where you're like, can I go ahead and have something with the bride and groom here? Do I sort of like actually say no? Have you come across anything like that?
I really want this to sound nice. I promise I do. I'm much more of a loving, easygoing guy than it may appear to be. There's always going to be a reason to break a fast. There's always going to be a reason not to start a fast. Like, if you're going to wait for a window in your schedule or in your life where there's nothing going on, I promise you it will only be there until you begin. And as soon as you begin, all types of things will come up. Every time I fast, my mom makes my favorite meal. I get invited out to some restaurant that I really want to go to, and these people are even going to pay. Like, I mean, it always happens. You know, like, always. Which is why you have to know that you've heard from the Lord in certain moments. You know, if the Lord has revealed to you, do 10 days and it covers a bunch of things that you would rather break for, God knew that before He spoke to you.
Yeah.
You know, like, now, yes, in the place of discipline, you know, have there been times where I've given myself grace even with the disciplined routine that I have? Absolutely. Yeah. But things, like I said earlier, things that come by design, I believe have an attachment to destiny. And so I take things that come by design with a much more heightened awareness than I do things that are just simple discipline. Though the discipline is important, right? Because the discipline was given to me by the Lord. But there's grace in the discipline. But man, when God comes to you and He says, hey, listen, fast the 3rd to the 5th, for me personally, I believe that there's a lot riding on the line. And so those are the ones that I don't want to miss. Like if I'm going to miss some, I choose to miss others. Because yeah, there are moments that I miss it. But there's always going to be something. There's always going to be a birthday party. There's always going to be a holiday. I'll never forget the year the Lord spoke to me and I fasted Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. Wow is wow. And I got crucified by family. Right? Because those are days you spend with family.
Yep.
I got crucified by family, even though I knew I had heard from the Lord. Now, just because I knew I had heard from the Lord didn't automatically mean He was going to shield me. Right? Like that's what we believe. Like, God, you asked me to do this. Okay, great. And I went in like a lamb before the shears. And got slaughtered. I mean, slaughtered. And I didn't understand why God would have allowed that. But I knew He spoke to me. And I followed it through. But there's been crazy times where the Lord has asked me to fast that it just wasn't convenient.